Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's KETIV Virtual Academy session. We're so excited that you're here. We have Austin Purvis with us today, and today he's going to be talking about streamlining sales and engineering workflows with integration. We hope that you're enjoying the learning experience that is KETIV Virtual Academy. However, I wanted to share with you guys and highlight our KETIV learning program on the next slide here. This is a subscription-based learning platform. It has both live and on-demand training for products in the Autodesk Product Design and Manufacturing Collection. This is a service that our team offers to manufacturers of all shapes and sizes, and we would love for you all to check it out. You can scan the QR code with your phone, or we're going to drop a link in the chat for you to get more details. But this program comes with your own KETIV advisor, personalized learning plans, and unique workshops each quarter. So you can learn on demand or live, whatever you prefer, about any product of your choice from your personal KETIV advisor. So check it out, learn more about the benefits on our website, and we would love to have you join this program to continue enhancing your learning capabilities and digitally transform your manufacturing business. As always, be sure to check out our upcoming KETIV Virtual Academy sessions. This takes place every Thursday at 10 a.m. And finally, please be sure to fill out the survey after our session. You can leave us feedback. Let us know what sessions you would like to see covered. Let us know what questions you have so that we can keep making this program better for you. And I will let Austin take it away.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Christina. Thank you, everyone, for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have all of you, and hopefully you can learn a little something while you're here. So today we're going to focus on two things: integration of CPQ, configure price quote. I tend to skip to the acronym a lot, but every time I'm saying CPQ, that's configure price quote. And then also we'll take a look at how CPQ can potentially enhance your sales workflow. So we have a little agenda here. I'll have a brief introduction of myself and some of my background, and then we'll jump right into it. We'll talk first about how you can supercharge the sales and engineering workflows with CPQ, and then we'll actually talk about how integrations can work with your workflow and how you can possibly bring in some of your other systems in kind of congruently with your CPQ system. So I like this a lot. I used to be on the implementation side, and you'll see here on this slide about me. I have a background in engineering from the University of Oklahoma, so Boomer Sooner for any of my fellow Sooners out there. I started at a defense contractor as an engineer, and then made the jump over to tech and specifically configure price quote. And I was on the implementation side for quite a few years, actually working with manufacturing customers once they've already bought the software and implementing it for them for their various use cases. So that's very interesting. And now I'm on the pre-sales side, so I actually get to work with potential customers, talk about how CPQ, configure price quote, might work for them. I think it's a lot of fun because I get to see how their quoting process is now, issues with configuring, maybe pain points, and talk about how configure price quote might alleviate some of those pains. So I love it. I think it's a great software, and obviously I get to work with it every day. But hopefully this will teach you a little bit more about it. We have some other KETIV Virtual Academy videos that dive deeper into what configure price quote is. But today we're going to focus more on the integration and sales workflow. And so as a brief overview of, configuration price and quoting software, what it is, it kind of encapsulates that whole process, and it gets mixed up sometimes with a CRM, customer relationship management software, where you actually have your accounts and potentially maybe leads, and it's part of your sales process. Configure price quote does fit into that process, but it's very I guess niche and focused in on actually configuring products, custom products, giving it a price, right, with your complex business logic, and then actually pushing a quote out the door. And it really excels at streamlining that whole process. And I have a few benefits listed out here, but it really excels with, making that quoting time faster. A lot of issues that we solve is it takes several weeks to go from the salesperson to engineering, getting a design created, a quote created, getting accurate pricing. I see a lot of manufacturers have a lot of their data on Excel, and so having to compare that, keep it updated. Another thing is always valid configurations, at least tacked on the software that KETIV has partnered with and implements. It always shows valid configurations. It won't let you publish what we call our product model, basically the configurator where you can configure those custom products if there's invalid logic. And so it makes sure that every time your salespeople or even engineering or even your end user is going through and configuring a product, that it's always valid. And then also allows you to configure using complex pricing rules, which I think is pretty awesome because you can connect it to your ERP system. So you can look at lead times, you can look at what the cost is for the materials. You can add in maybe some of your complicated labor pricing, calculations, your shipping, all sorts of different things. And you can pull those from different systems and put it together in an intelligent and easy to understand quote for your customers or your salesperson. So those are some of the benefits. And quite frankly, coming from the CPQ implementation background, I've gotten to see a lot of the challenges that creates as well. And so I wanted to touch on that on this slide because there's a ton of benefits to CPQ, but I also want, as you're maybe contemplating adding a CPQ solution, or you already have it, there are some challenges to think about. And so a couple of those that I've listed out is the discovery portion of a configure price quote implementation. So I found that some of the biggest setbacks in timeline is actually finding that information. So sometimes it's somebody on the shop floor who just knows and has a lot of that tribal knowledge, or maybe it's just within the company. There's a lot of tribal knowledge, and I found some of the biggest challenges is getting that onto paper, and so that we as the implementers or your team who's going to be implementing, that they can actually get all that knowledge into the software. So that's a big challenge. Another is delivery time. So obviously discovery impacts that, but also there's all sorts of different things that can impact the delivery time. And then another issue slash challenge that I've seen is kind of the sales organization buy-in and even buy-in across the organization, because introducing a new software is always can be difficult. People don't really want to change from what they know. But I've seen sales organizations specifically, maybe have a little bit harder time understanding if there's not, some sort of customer success team behind them that's helping, drive that buy-in. And so here at KETIV, we actually do have a customer success team that's devoted to making sure that there's adoption across across your organization. They can help develop plans for how best to get buy-in with your sales teams, with your engineering teams. But I find that once organizations properly adopt the software, there's really some massive return on investment with getting faster quotes out the door, more accurate configurations, better pricing, good quote documents, and even things like CAD automation and generation. So there's lots of different features, and you'll probably see them sprinkled out throughout this presentation and this session. But if there's any more questions, feel free to reach out to us at the KETIV team. We love, if you can't tell, I love talking about this. So feel free to reach out whenever. So if I move on, this is called, integrating CPQ systems with sales workflows, which it's a wordy title for this slide. But I like to start to get I want to start getting everyone's mind thinking with, where does CPQ fit in? Where does the software fit in with your sales workflow, right? Because you have your customer relationship management software, however you're doing that, however you're keeping track of your clients and your customers. And you also maybe have an ERP, which is the enterprise resource planning system. There's lots of different systems that are coming together. You might have a database of information, if that's Excel or Azure or something else. Legacy systems, different applications internally. And you might have to log out, log into a new one, get information, have your windows side by side, and that can get really heavy. And so one of the main points of why you want to have an integrated CPQ solution is you want all those systems to talk to each other. You don't want to have to maintain your customers in a CRM system, such as, let's say, Salesforce or NetSuite or HubSpot, right? And then you don't want to have that also hosted in your CPQ system. Ideally, you want to only have your salespeople go in, maybe add a new customer, add a new opportunity, and you want to have that automatically flow over to your CPQ system. And so when you're thinking about integrating with your sales workflow, a lot of times what I recommend, and it's a pretty common process, but identify what those key integration points are. And so I typically like to think about what are the most important systems that you think should be integrated? A lot of times we find that the most important system is an ERP, that enterprise resource planning system. Getting the materials, the part numbers, the if it's in stock, the lead times, all those different things flowing from your source of truth in the ERP over to CPQ. We find that's a really important system to integrate when you're starting to thinking about doing a CPQ implementation. Um, you know, some of the benefits you can see from that is it streamlines the process. You can have a lot higher close rates because you don't have invalid configurations. You're not selling parts that you don't have in stock. You're not mispricing them, so having to stomach the lost revenue on that, right? If you sell something at a lower price. Another benefit, as I kind of, I'm thinking about benefits right now, but you can have faster sales cycles. And then the big one I tell customers and potential customers is you can build guardrails for your sales team, which is great, right? Because you can build guardrails, but you can also build it so they're customizable. So I like to think of you have these different channels, and I'll touch on this in the end of at the end of the session. But you have different channels that you can build with your CPQ software. So when you're thinking about, integrating it into your sales, workflow, your sales cycle, you can have it maybe where it's on your website, and you have your customers who are coming in making configurations, and they can come into your sales cycle like that. Or maybe your sales team gets on the phone with a customer and starts configuring a product, and there's guardrails for them, and maybe those guardrails are wider than you have for your end customer, right? Your sales team can do some more custom things that they deem appropriate. And then maybe for your engineering team, you can also introduce, no guardrails at all. If engineering says that they can make your product, X wide and X high, that might not be available for the sales team, but and the engineering department knows, that's a valid configuration, and they can add those in there, and maybe you cannot have as many guardrails, but you can customize that in this system and make for a really smooth sales workflow where all the departments, whether that's external like a customer, but even engineering or sales can kind of be a part of that workflow, and you can pass it back and forth. So the last 2 points on the slide is, develop your clear strategy and test thoroughly, which I think are pretty straightforward. And when I was making this presentation, I was thinking, these seem almost a little bit, obvious, at least to me, as I'm looking at, what does integrating with a sales workflow look like? But I think it's good to call out because, once you identify what are those key systems I want to integrate and have speaking to my CPQ system, what's next? I think actually writing down a clear strategy for how you're going to do that. What information do you want back and forth? And then make sure you're testing thoroughly. Make sure you have test scripts of, test this, you should see that, you should see this price, just to validate that it's working correctly. So there's a lot going on when you're thinking about integrating this CPQ system with your workflow, but I think it's good to touch on. And so I did kind of already go into this and talk about some of the benefits and why you should do it. So I'm not gonna spend too long on this slide. But I think, it's still good to touch on that as I kind of think through this, that you want to continuously refine the CPQ process based on insights that you get from it. So that's one thing that's really cool about the CPQ platform, is that you can get insights on where your customers are looking, what products they're adding, how they're customizing it. And you can look and continually iterate as you're improving that process in your sales workflow. And so that's pretty cool, as you can see how customers are using this platform. If they are using it, you can see how your sales team's using it. You can add different functionalities to the platform, to the CPQ platform, that enhance your sales team's ability to sell. And so I think that's pretty interesting as well. So uh, this part is kind of my bread and butter, the planning for a CPQ integration with your workflow. And so when I say planning for CPQ integration, that also kind of means planning for the CPQ implementation. And so I really like implementation. Again, I came from implementation and doing that for customers. And so I got to see a lot of that planning and see a lot and help advise on what was the best path forward. Um, and so as I look here, uh, there's obviously I have these clear points and I think this might still be a little bit repetitive, but I want to really hammer on this, that the first thing is identify what those key integration points are. What is CPQ solving for you? Is it faster quoting? So are we going to first put a couple products in the CPQ system so that your sales team can turn around quotes really quickly? Maybe you don't have to you don't have to go to engineering and validate a configuration, right? You know that it's validated already. I mean, you can just send it off to the customer with a custom quote documentation, a PDF of all the terms and conditions and the bill of materials and what they're buying. Identify what those points are when you're implementing CPQ. What are you looking to solve? And then think about where it's going to fit into your existing workflow. So when you're developing that clear strategy, what does success look like, right? You don't want to be repeating uh, you don't want to be repeating work by having to host maybe your source of truth of customer data or part data in two different systems. But think about the strategy for, okay, I have my parts over here in the ERP system, but then I want them to flow to CPQ and I want to configure this product with all these parts. And then I actually want to send it back to the ERP, to make sure that's where I'm going to have my quotes held, or maybe I want my orders there before it's firmed up into a job for my manufacturing team. There's a lot of strategy that goes into thinking about how are you actually going to integrate CPQ into your workflow. And then again, I said this on the last slide, but thoroughly test that integration as you're going throughout the process. I've seen some implementations where, we'll get to the very end and a customer will start testing and it just won't solve what they initially went out to solve, right? The pain point isn't gone, right? The quoting is still taking a long time, or the documents they're still having to go in and edit. And, you want to make sure you're actually solving that process and you are succeeding with this implementation, because it is an investment, and you want to make sure that it's working. And then the last thing is that enablement for the sales team or engineering or the end users of this platform, right? You want to make sure that the sales team isn't going into the configure price quote software and adding customers there, right? Or maybe thinking about, hey, we want to allow them to add it in both so the information can flow back and forth. But just training your team internally, and maybe your customers or distributors, whoever's going to use this software, you want to train them to utilize this new platform to its maximum potential. So I think that's a lot. I think it was repetitive, meaning, I kept hammering in on, you want to identify the points, develop a strategy, test it, and then train your team. But I think it's good to think about, and it's good to actually sit down, pen on paper, or diagram it out. What does a successful CPQ implementation, integration into your existing selling process look like? But when you are thinking about that, you know, I did want to present in this call, what are some of those features that you might consider when you're adding it to your sales workflow? And so there's the general features, which I didn't include on here, which is configuring products. It's in the name, configure, price, and quote. So it's usually assumed that when you're going to use a CPQ software that you'll have a product, you'll configure it so it's custom, maybe never seen before. That the user wants it X inches wide by this much tall with these accessories on it in this place. But on top of that, and that's priced and quoted out. But on top of that, there's some additional features that a CPQ software, such as Tacked On, which KETIV offers. And so some of those I've listed out. And so we have CAD automation and BOM automation. So BOM, bill of material automation. And so for the CAD, right, do you want engineering drawings or engineering files like step files for Inventor. Do you want those generated automatically based off of what was built? You can see at the bottom of this slide, there's a generated drawing on a medical device tray or trolley. And you can see there, that is from a CPQ implementation that was done where they sell these medical device, trolleys, and from it, whenever there's a quote generated, this isn't sent to the customer, but instead this is sent off to maybe the engineering team, or it's available for the salesperson if the customer is curious. But it's automatically generated, so you don't have to have an engineer that goes and actually pulls up this file, customizes it, changes the different dimensions, right? So that's a feature that you can consider that's really powerful. The other is the bill of material automation, and this is really common, but actually pulling together a whole BOM of what's included in this configuration, which is different than the sales BOM, right? Where the sales BOM is, this is what I bought. Maybe I bought this monitor arm, but what goes into that monitor arm? You might buy those. Or you might actually manufacture those, and so it goes. You have the metal tubing, and then you have the different attachments that make it. The hinges that swing back and forth. All that actually will go into a more extensive manufacturing bill of materials. So that can be created. One of the things here, and I think this video, if I can get it to run, there we go. So we have this kind of. And let's turn off that volume. But we have this visualization right here where you can see as I'm editing things, the visualization is actually changing, and the user can actually see your product, which is pretty cool. I think this is a really interesting feature. I think it can provide a lot of value. You can see here there's lots of things changing in this elevator. I love the visualization. I got to learn a lot about it in the implementation. I got to do a lot of it. And so it's really interesting. You can see here that, they changed the buttons, they changed how it looked. You could drag and drop things around. And so it makes it really user-friendly for your end customer. Sometimes the sales team needs it. A lot of times they don't, just because they know the product so well. But visualization can really aid in supercharging that sales cycle and that sales workflow, so the customer can actually see what they're going to buy, and you can set their expectations like that. And so, a lot of these things, and there's just two more, but a lot of these things I will say, make sure you think about what it would be like to implement, right? Where's the data going to come from? Do you already have models for visualization? Things like that. Do you already have the CAD models? Do you already have an example bill of materials? Because it does take effort to implement these, but it can very well be well worth it. And then the last two, document generation and a review process. Document generation, I think, is pretty straightforward. You can just generate, a PDF or a Word document that you can send off to the end customer, or the sales team can have, or something like that. And then the review process, right? Do you want to implement something where engineering can go and review, you know, what what was quoted, and maybe that they have to approve it before the quote is sent off to the customer, or maybe if a price is above a certain point, you need maybe a vice president or someone in the C-suite to sign off on a configuration. If it's a really big job, you can kind of set those rules and business logic up accordingly. So those are some features I would that tacked on specifically, but CPQ softwares offer. And so I want to bring this to mind for when you're thinking about maybe adding this software to your sales workflow. What is possible, and there's a lot that is, and it can provide some really amazing value. And then I just have a couple more things. One I touched on before. It's you want to design, as you're thinking about putting CPQ in your sales workflow. You want to design it for a guided experience for different channels. So maybe, like I said before, you have an end user, you have an end customer, you maybe have distributors, you maybe have an internal sales team. And so think about how you're designing this CPQ software for each one, because it can be configured so that each channel has different experiences. And then maybe even within distributors, right? You have a distributor over in this region, and then you have another one over here, and you want them to actually have a branded portal that they can visit, or a different experience, because maybe they sell differently than your internal sales team. You can design those different channels to make sure that they're selling appropriately, selling most efficiently. And so when you're thinking about implementing this into your CPQ workflow, the software can handle a lot. And this is another thing that I like to touch on because it doesn't get thought about until maybe the end of the implementation process. And so think about how this would fit into your workflow. Think about how your internal sales team is selling now and how a CPQ software might alleviate that, and maybe what the tool would look like. And I have a couple bullet points on, your end customer. They might have visual aids and they might have more clear instructions and interactive tools. Whereas the engineering team, they might just have a screen, where the end customer has a bunch of pages they click through. Engineering might just have a bunch of like one screen that has a bunch of inputs and they just really quickly go through and add the numbers. They don't need the fancy visual aids. They don't need clear instructions. They just know, right? They have that knowledge. But you want to think about how the different channels will be using the CPQ software. And so I think that's nice to give some thought to. And then the last thing is, and I said this before and I'll say it again, but continuously improving on that sales workflow. So document the existing process. You know, Here at KETIV, we offer some training material when you do an implementation through us, if you use our services team, which they're fantastic with the delivery. But once they finish the delivery, they'll actually document up, how to use it, how to maintain it, how to add new products. And then, so documentation like that, where you can actually train up your sales team, and maybe your engineering team, maybe end customers for how to use the configurator and the whole CPQ software as a whole. That I always recommend to document. And then I think, regularly reviewing and looking at the analytics for what CPQ is, providing in terms of what your customers are buying, and just continuously iterate through and think, how can we make this better? What's not working? What can we fix? Or maybe what can we add? What are some of those features? Maybe I don't have visualization yet. How can I incorporate visualization to really make a smooth buying process for my customer? So that's all I have for today. I just as kind of a recap, we talked about, what is CPQ? What are some of those benefits? We really harped on, going through that process and planning of what are the pain points you're trying to solve, what's the strategy for solving that with CPQ, and what is, how are we going to do that? What's the success? Testing throughout the implementation, and then train your sales team. And so we talked about all that. Next steps, I would say, is, if you're already in an implementation, maybe going through those. If you're curious about CPQ, reach out to us here at KETIV. There's some contact details there, which you're welcome to reach out to. I love talking about this stuff with potential customers and talking about maybe if CPQ is the right solution. We want to make sure it is the right solution and not just another tool that isn't used in your organization. But I find a lot of times CPQ is a great fit for a lot of manufacturers. And then the next session is June 13th. We'll be talking about integrations, and what it looks like to prepare your data for a CPQ implementation. And I love that topic as well because that goes back to the discovery and all that. And so I think that's a lot of fun to talk about. So hopefully you got some good value out of this today. And I also have a poll that we're going to put up. And the poll is, where do you think your sales team would benefit the most from an integrated selling solution? And there's some answers there. It's multiple choice, I believe. So pick what you think would be the best benefit, or what would your sales team benefit the most from with something like a CPQ solution. And so I think that'll come up. But in the meantime, we'll jump to the question and answer. So if there's any questions, feel free to put it in the chat, and we can answer that here. So yeah, but thank you for joining.